Welcome back. Donut and I are now going over the game against FNB Chenia. Do you remember what they were running? They're obviously running a cane deck here. Was this the
Yeah, they
Varus
were
Aatrox?
running. That was, I believe, Varus Aatrox, and then they ran Vayne Kane, and their third deck. Let me
Red
just double
Gwen?
check it. I don't think Chenia was on Red Gwen. But I remember that Chenia banned my Aatrox deck, which I thought was a misban,
Right.
and they left up elusives. Their
Mhm.
third deck was Lulu Jinx, which we won't be
That's
seeing
right.
in this
Yeah.
series because I had to ban Lulu Jinx.
Yeah.
So
All right. What do you think about this mulligan in this match?
So I have a Phantom Butler in my hand, which is pretty important in the matchup.
Yeah.
Um, and the rest of the cards are okay, but not great. I think I mulligan them. And
Yeah.
Chenia has possibly the best curve
Yeah.
already. If I remember correctly, Chenia keeps all 4 cards here, and I feel sad about it.
Yeah. I think what always surprises me about the Vayne and Varus decks is that you always just keep your 1-drop and 3-drop, and it always just draws you into your cane or whatever. And it just feels like every single time they mulligan, they've always got a perfect hand. I don't know if it's just me. Um,
I've
or
definitely
yeah,
had pretty awkward hands with it,
okay.
but um, I don't know. After they play Booer Cultist into Darken Aegis, it feels like this game is almost over. Like
Yeah,
this game ends up going longer, but that's the most impactful thing that happens for a lot of Aatrox decks.
yeah.
I believe I end up facing Booer Cultist into Darken Aegis another time this tournament just to uh, I don't know, have another game where my opponent has a really good opener. So
threats that you can just go wide with, and I was kind of hoping to see perhaps,
actually, I'm remembering this isn't their Aatrox deck. This is their Vayne
kind of fell off in the
uh,
Vancouver match,
Vayne
but I
Kane
think we
deck
can tell
based on
from
this
this
matchup. I
build,
remember
you're
how I lost this
anticipating
game.
a lot more of these elusive style builds, no doubt. But Dona opening up with Red Gwen and Chenia trying to make it happen.
We cannot tell what deck Chenia is open with because
So
all 4 of these cards we see in the mulligan are
here I like that we're
the
both
lowest
roping
Aatrox
out.
and
Or no,
Vayne Vayne.
Chenia
So we are
has already
wondering
made the
again,
mulligan.
clueless which
I
Darken
might be
deck
the
Chenia
slowest
is going
mulliganer
for here.
in this tournament.
And as
But
we
that's okay. I think
saw in
mulliganing is
red,
the most
it's just going to
important
be a
decision that you
surprise
make
for
in
him
most
to
games.
find
So
Boulevard.
it's pretty good for me
Donut
to take
is
all my time.
looking at the list. We see a great
Um,
early curve, but
but
when
yeah, I
you
saw that
are trying
Chenia
to
kept
lock
the
down
full
in an
hand
early
and
tempo, if
sort of
Donut is able to stabilize,
get
this
myself
could
ready
well
to
open
get
up the game.
murdered
Actually is a
by,
really great
by
blocker
some
here thanks to the
really
Darken
great
Aegis.
draws.
Tough keyword does a lot
So,
in these sort of early game focused matchups. Now the
oh yeah, I
Runeterra
remember
Guardian
this now.
coming
So
in
I
on mulligan.
mulliganed into a redeemed
The
prodigy
cards that
and
we were
play it here.
excited for coming into this
I get
tournament
to
were the
threaten
return of the
flock
Red Gwen
if I
archetype.
attack, but I don't
I'm
have
hoping that
it.
this goes beyond in Donut's hand because
And
when we're talking about
I
like
think what
these
I
sort of
do here is I
elusive slash
attack because
cultist
I
decks
can
that we're
then
running,
play.
they're pretty low
Oh
in
no, I don't.
aggression. Usually it's just Fish
Um,
and Furious Wielder depending on the region
hmm.
combination you're going for.
I want to talk about this. So the lack of attack is because you want to set up like a bigger attacker later. Is my thinking.
Yeah, so this 3-2 is going to get multiple trades with my board,
Yeah.
but the downside is I don't get to trade with it sooner by
Mm.
playing a 3-1.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think looking back on how this turn played out, probably my best line would have been to play the Phantom Butler.
Yeah.
I think I still would not attack with it because obviously it trades, but um, just looking at their 1-drop, it's clear to me that it's going to trade with my 2-2 and my 3-1 hollowed units because I don't have a Ravenous Flock. So uh, even though that's like a super negative trade for me, this is the best opener in their deck, and without Flock, that's the only way that I can really ever do anything this game.
Yeah.
Uh,
They've
the
also.
reason to play. Oh, sorry, what was that?
I was gonna say they've also got like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and like our deck sort of can't beat a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without like Gwen or Harold. Um, and so
Yeah,
just looking at the hand state, like I'm not happy as Donut. Um,
yeah,
just
I am
looking like
also
at this
unhappy as Donut with this.
Yeah.
Um, but I think so. The reason to play Redeemed Prodigy is if my opponent doesn't have an equipment that
Yeah.
buffs the health of their 1-drop, it gets an attack in, which is really good for me. Um, but the reason to play the Butler is assuming that my opponent plays their good equipment. The Butler can then not attack and block their unit, which sets it up to die in the future. And so I think I would have preferred that play, because here the idea of getting open attacked would be pretty bad for me. Although my opponent, because they kept all of their cards, has the perfect card to develop and won't be open attacking me anyways. So it ends up being
So these glimpse
not
builds
super
are
relevant,
getting
but
a
it's an
ton of
interesting
attention
thing to
on
think
them.
about.
It's a little bit rough when it comes to overwhelm, but we've seen players get very creative, very sneaky, trying to outplay lifesteal and other healing effects. Chenia just trying
What
to
are they
supplement
talking
his
For
board
us?
dominance with the Dark and Aegis, a 3/3
Maybe.
baton, get some
I'm not sure.
trades, and
I
you
missed
don't know
the
why
best
they
of
had-
the
value
conversation.
into a more expensive
Yeah.
unit. You're going to get much more long-term
Oh, they
pressure
do open
with what's
attack me.
happening this
Yeah,
trade.
so I think here it would have been a lot better for me if I could block with the 3-1 and then develop Redeemed Prodigy and attack with that into a 3-1 tough unit.
Honestly, in the last match that we
Um,
saw, Skarsgård, where the Hallowed procs got up to 12, 11, 13, somewhere around those lines. You know, we're going to have to see how this plays out in the late game. A lot of Hallowed units still in the hand for Donut, so maybe just taking it a little bit slower and saying, you know, I'll go in for these big attacks later, but I'm not sure how many procs
Interesting
are
predict.
going
I
to
think
just
it's
let
it's
sit
just
on board
better
while
take.
Chenia approaches the late game, and we do see the Kane, so we are aware this
But
is the
do they
Aatrox.
maybe
Yeah,
they can
This
blame
is
it
the
on
main
this?
Kane build. No Aatrox, so the late game a little bit weaker.
It looks like they clicked concerted, but I always think I can see what they predicted and never pick right. Oh, no, they did. Okay.
Do I want the concerted strike now to get more reactivity? It looks like that is the pickup. One of the few ways
So,
to deal with some of these bigger
here, yeah, I
models
think
like
I
the
open
Armored
attack.
Phantoms, and now the double retreat prodigy comes through because now you're
And
getting
this is
full
okay
on
for me,
strike.
but I don't get...
Just biding your time until you can
Actually,
get
no,
those
I would get
units
pretty
as
reasonably
possible.
punished if I had
Choosing
developed
the
on this
open
turn.
attack, not letting
So,
Chenia develop, as
playing the
there are a
Redeemed
couple
Prodigies
of
ends up not being
units
too
in
bad for
Chenia's
me.
deck between the Cultist and the
Although,
Crush.
definitely the
Chose to
block
greed it out for
with the
weeks.
3-1
Could have gotten punished
would have
pretty
been better, I think, into this specific hand.
Fortunately, after
So,
that attack, not too much has gone down. We have the ambitious cultist
my
coming
opponent
through
draws a
with
free Kane.
Encore. We're gonna look in the box
Um,
once more
Then
later
I
on
keep
in this
track of
game
that,
to find
of course.
another
Because I was doing my
I
best to
don't know.
hand read. I
don't know if you
don't
feel
hand read in every
sometimes
game,
when you are
and I
playing
don't
the same
correctly
game
hand
over
read
and
or
you have some
hand
different
track
cards
in
that
particular
feels
in
like you're weighted
a lot of
towards certain
games, but
cards,
at
and this
Worlds
one
I
card
was
the exact same card that was
hand
being played
tracking
in the
most of
last
the time.
game that we saw on camera.
Um,
Chenia is going for the
at least
Encore,
before I
just
was
trying to run it
knocked
back,
out of Worlds.
and that's what I appreciate. If Encore's gonna come out, you know it's
I
gonna
mean,
come out
after
again.
you and yeah,
Chenia
it's
now
much easier
in a
to hand
position to just
practice.
keep
They show it
developing.
to you.
The
It's a lot
triple
easier.
Kane means he can be very aggressive.
Well,
and
I had to
reckless
play the last
with
game
his Dark,
after
and every
being
time he
already
Oh,
attacks,
not
that's fine.
knocked
it's a
out.
little bit stronger
So
as well.
I didn't
The challenger keeping the board under control.
hand track because it's a lot of effort.
When you take a mid game like this,
For me, I
So-
only really remember the first two sets, like the AragOrnn set, because I already knew you were out at that point,
And I
like,
think
didn't
the Kane
interest
is
me as much.
actually a
So I genuinely don't remember how that set goes.
here the chain
Yeah.
champion spell is actually quite impactful, starting that free attack.
So here I drew Harrowing, which makes this game feel sort of saved because I now have chances. But my opponent's hand is really great. Their attack here is interesting. They don't want to give me the Ephemeral Can't Block card for some reason, which doesn't seem very good for them. I might have liked it if they made the full swing here.
That was
Because-
just a vial based. Oh, no, they've got like the spell shield.
Using that utility boulevard to deny the strike for Kane.
Unless I'm
Yeah, but
misunderstanding what you're talking
Also,
about.
like, if they had just full swung, they
Yeah.
can lose their 3-5 to a Vial Feast. That doesn't hurt them very much.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant pull the Reckoner with the game.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
they-
want to pull the Reckoner
yeah.
with the Cane. I just
They
wanted
can
to get
pull
in with their units. I'm pretty likely to block and try to trade with their Booer Cultist, but then they get to play their weapon and draw their Aatrox, which is pretty good for them. They have a reasonable number of plays in the next few turns, but they're very all in on these like Cane Shadow Steps. Or I think that's what that card is called.
It's called Shadows.
And I might have preferred if they just attacked, because often you don't want to trade with this Reckoner, but in this spot they're just at such a tempo advantage because of their like optimal opener that they might as well attack and push some damage.
I don't disagree. Like, they need to threaten you on a clock because as soon as you play Harrow, you're quite likely to win. Not guaranteed, obviously, but That's like
Yeah.
that's like a guaranteed kill on what's it? 9? Yeah.
Yeah. Harrowing represents a kill at some point in this game when you can afford to play it if you have enough life.
We,
But I think Chenia might
another hero.
look to get rid of this Kane as soon as possible. Get one on
Yeah.
board, can
The
get
second
one
Harrowing
on
is
global
really
forward,
a pretty
sticking
bad
around
draw.
ever since
The first one was really good though. Given the way the game had played out, it was basically my only way to win
and I don't see it
because my
happening
opponent had such
and, you know,
powerful,
already
like
made,
relevant early
Donut feels
tempo.
pretty safe playing more for the late game on this one.
Fortunately,
So,
token is
what
coming
do I play
out,
here?
next. So
Looking at it, I
Donut's making way to
think
have to turn to play Harrowing, but then we've got Harrowing into Harrowing.
Katarina
Now
is
we see Donut
reasonable,
shift to
as
which
is
units do I want to
open
recklessly
attack
throw
with
down and have them
Fallen
trade
Reckoner,
so that I can
because
resurrect
my
them?
open attack threatens to trade with any of their units,
Cancers to get a lot of work in,
and
the Ruined
if they
Reckoner
don't,
to get
then
him a lot
they're
of work.
really sad
So
because I
key.
play
Ruined Reckoner
my
granting
Midnight
Can
Raid
block to him is
generator.
going to be permanent, and then coming through means that Donut's like, I want the Reckoners in the Harrowing.
And so
There are
here
some
he
of them
chooses to
wide
preserve
open
life
counters,
instead
they're
of
all
getting
buffed by Hallowed,
Aegis
and
into
then 2 or 3 of your opponent's blockers are out of the
Aatrox.
equation.
Oh wait, I keep
Lethal is
thinking there's an
already
Yeah.
Aatrox. This isn't an Aatrox deck.
This is not an Aatrox deck.
This is the Vayne deck. He plays the elusive.
Both the Fallen and the Ruined and the Risen, all great targets to come off of the Harrowing, going to take away all of Chenia's ability to block.
Starts
And
to
then
get
if the first one
scary.
doesn't kill the
So I'm
second
playing
one,
this like
twice as many
very
blockers,
defensively. I just need to survive until my Harrowing.
units in the deck.
Ironically, Kane
I
is
think at
struggling to find
this
his
point,
way off
maybe
the
last
board.
turn, I started
Chenia
counting
make use
my
of
mana
these
and
fine
figuring out
early
what I'm
points
allowed
to
to
get
play
the
before
challenger and quick
basically
attack
before
to
the
take
game
down
ends.
Katarina before she flips.
Um,
Donut, again, not phased by this. You're fine with your units going down because he's already playing towards that win condition of the Harrowing.
Yeah, and actually, Donut might be in a
So-
little bit of trouble here. There's no blockers coming out, and with Noxie and
Here
Emperor
I
actually
like this
going
fervor
down
because
below,
with the Blade's Edge I can
Wild
beat
Beast
most
were
pieces of
really
interaction that
blocker
they could have. I think
So
Chenia was
currently
on
looking, if
2
they
copies
decide
of
to
the Spell
push
Shield
this
card,
unit
and that
as
was
high as,
particularly on my mind.
say,
But
11,
also
the
Momentous
flank's
Choice
gonna
is a
be
card I
pretty
can beat
full
here,
with the
whereas if I
Reapers.
had Vile Feast Blade's Edged, I don't get to
And
beat
I
those
think that's
cards.
what Chenia's trying to push through
Um,
here. Blade's
It's
Edge to
interesting
push
to
the
me
spell
that
shield. Noxie
he goes
taking
for the
it
Spell
down,
Shield
Aegis
knowing
goes
that
down,
card is in my hand.
Ruined Cultist,
I wasn't
and Kane
entirely
fizzles
understanding
as
of that
his
point at
target.
the time, and I still don't fully get it. Do you ever watch it for this? From memory,
No.
he's trying to beat Flock. That's what it was. It was something like he doesn't need a Blade's Edge the can, and then you can like double Flock.
Okay.
Or something
Yeah, I
like
think
because he wanted
he
to
ends
get
up
like a good
playing
record.
around Flock for this entire game.
Yeah, because he does the riposte on the one.
But I don't think he should think of himself as being in a favored enough position to just be playing around Flock here. His open attack is representing, 4-8 damage right now? And he could buff that to 12 or to 11 with this riposte, but that's not a very cohesive game plan.
Yeah.
So I don't like playing your card into my open fleeting card.
Yeah.
And if he had saved that, he actually wins on the next turn. But he also had a line that could have been winning on the next turn anyways, if he was okay losing to Flock. So, I don't know. I really didn't like that Spell Shield play. And I think Chenia, I don't know, makes some awkward plays in the last portions of this game that give me a chance, but not a very realistic one of coming back.
Kane starting a free attack, challenging a unit does mean that if the target disappears, you don't just get to go into combat for free anyway. And now the attack looking much less impactful. One shy of lethal with riposte.
So here Chenia goes for lethal and puts riposte on the 3/2 to play around Flock. But if you'd put riposte on Vayne, he actually plays around the Vile Feast in my hand. And I think you should probably prefer to play around Vile Feast than Flock here, given that this Buru Cultist has been crushing me this entire game and has been damaged for most of it. It's like the ideal Flock target. So I stay alive at 1 here, and Encore doesn't save him. That would be a tilting way to lose. I'm pretty happy to not be dead from it. And then I try to work out my harrowing and my outs. And I play Reckoner here. I might have played this too fast. The way that this game ends up playing out, I would have been a little bit better off if I had Reckoner, but my opponent has Cane Spell and Vayne that could both kill me here. I'm able to set it up so that it looks like I'm bluffing Flock, and it makes it awkward for Chenia, but here I should slam Harrowing, and this was a thing I was pretty frustrated myself with after the round. I look over at their list and realize that I'm dead to Cane Spell and Cataclysm, both as one-ofs remaining in their deck, and realize that I can beat those by holding up Glimpse Beyond, and I can threaten enough damage by Arachnoid Sentrying whatever card they play. The issue is that by playing this, I lose to single combats, which are a 3 of in the deck, and also I think some buff spells even, or no, sorry, buff spells are the one thing I beat. I lose to my opponent just developing 2 units in a row, and I lose to Chenia having any concerted strikes or single combats. The way the math works out, I think I end up threatening 15 damage if my Midnight Raid goes through, and I'm able to hold up Glimpse Beyond in a way that I can beat exactly Cataclysm plus basically like 2 copies of Momentous Choice sitting in hand. Even though my Harrowing would have lost to the face-up Cane spell in hand, by developing, I lose to Vayne in particular because she just starts a free attack if I use more than one action. And even though I can bluff Flock, because I don't have Flock, I'm not actually winning with it. So that Momentous Choice draw on the last turn, forcing me to play scared and be dead to any rally or any free attack, made this game really hard. My opponent drew well in like the early game and late game to set me up for lethal. So, but I don't really like how Chenia played around Flock here. I think going for like the lethal lets you still play to win the game on the next turn if it doesn't work. But it's not great to have like maybe played this Vayne and played around it. You could have slammed the Cane spell and then just done a concerted strike as I was already tapped under Harrowing. But I also would have won this game, or at least been close, if my Glimpse Beyond found one of my 3 Flocks. I could kill that 3/2 Buru Cultist, chump the Vayne, and I'd still very much be in the game. But I had a series of not great draws, and Chenia had some really good ones to end that game out there. So
I think like the main takeaway is that this Buru Cultist lasted the entire game, and Chenia did get the Momentous Choice that allowed them to pressure so much. I think seeing the line, seeing the line in quotes, despite it probably being the wrong line to take, of seeing that you can win despite, like without Harrowing, just winning through things besides that, I think is interesting. And I think had you seen that ahead of time, the Pump Block Reckoner would have been better on your attack then.
Yeah, so the issue with that is at some point, if I actually am threatening lethal, Chenia is forced to threaten lethal back at me. Chenia was able to play so safe because my weak play of not playing the Harrowing meant that he was beating any card I could play, basically. Whereas, or with the highly interactive hand he had. Whereas there's only 2 cards that could have been in his hand that beat the Harrowing. There were 8 or 9 cards in the deck which beat my play, and he had one of them. So he was able to play just much safer. Even though I would have been dead on the spot if I had played Harrowing, it was definitely the best play in that spot.
Your draw didn't seem awful, but like it had powerful cards, but not the single power cards of like Gwen or Flock or Sentry or anything like that. Well, it had Sentry, but only at the
Yeah.
like,
So
not as
I had
dominant.
I think, very medium draw. I didn't draw the right cards to apply pressure on the turns I would have needed to. And I just drew my mediocre units that trade and fight for the board a little bit, which was okay because I could have played for harrowing in this matchup and almost was able to. But Chenia applied enough pressure with like the perfect draw that it was very hard to beat.
Yeah. And also, like, I think this is the third game in a row where draw felt like it wasn't in your favor. Now, against Roji, like, it was more even in that sense. Like, in both of those games, Roji also had an awkward draw.
Yeah, so I think game one against Roji, draw was definitely in his favor. He predicted, I think, twice, but he drew 2 Unforgiving Colds and 2 Furious Wielders in the top like 18 cards of the deck. And a lot of the reason his hand was awkward was because of the cards that he kept. He could have mulliganed for a better hand, but wanted the interaction pieces. Game 2 against Roji, he definitely drew awkwardly and poorly alongside me. But I think this game my opponent started with a great hand and then kept drawing good cards, and the same happened mostly in my first game against Roji. So, but I mean that's card games. I know in my qualifier run I drew very well consistently, and won a lot of games I shouldn't have because I was able to be the one keeping all 4 cards in my mulligan. So
it's better this way around than the other way around.
Yeah, definitely I got lucky in the one tournament I would have chosen to be lucky in this year.
Yeah.
If I only get one.
And again, it's a 1-drop, so you don't really want to use the Ravenous Flock on it across the
I don't know how long this lasts until the next game.
Fervor ended up not connecting.
I don't know.
Skip.
I think Skarzig was talking about how I didn't want to flock the 1-drop, but I actually really wanted to flock it. So that's funny.
Is this the game? This is the only time that...
This is the only time I was
Yeah.
allowed to play elusives,
So
and
this was the
game Twitch chat was really mad at me for mulliganing Esmus,
Yeah.
which I stand by. That was definitely the right play. I have the attack token, and so I really want to set up turn 3 Purifying Flames, which is the best card in my deck in this matchup, into an elusive. And so keeping Esmus would not have saved this hand. Drawing all 3 Purifying Flames and no units is just a bad hand.
Yeah. Having played this, like, I was playing your decks when I was screaming against Janspot a lot of the time. The absolute power of just keeping Purifying Flames and getting, like, any other elusive. Like, I think Esmus isn't the worst elusive in your deck, but, like, every other elusive you can get feels better, except maybe the 3-drop. And there's so many elusives in the deck that just when you keep going through your mulligans, this just always ends up being the right thing to get rid of the Esmus in.
Yeah. The Esmus is okay and actually pretty good if I have token on evens,
Yeah.
but given that I have it on odds, the most powerful thing I can be doing, and the thing I should be mulliganing for, is playing 2 elusives on turn 3. I have to mulligan everything but Purifying Flames to have a chance at that.
Yeah.
And if I miss and even just hit a Teemo is threatening more damage than Esmus on that turn, because Esmus won't be able to support.
Yeah.
So I very much am happy with my mulligan.
You've got, what, 6 draws to get any other elusive? If it's a 1-drop, that's even better, and it's pretty likely to get 2 elusives, so the Purifying Flames does hit 2 things.
Yeah, and Esmus is a card I wouldn't mind drawing into, but it's definitely not even in the top half of the cards in my deck, given that I have a Purifying Flames. So I'm very happy to mulligan it.
But now we're going to have to see Chenia move over to this Vayne Aatrox, a deck they went 0-2 on earlier in the day, up against Donut on this Teemo Zoe elusive list. Purifying Flames in the opening hand, I have to imagine, is a keep. The earlier you get this...
So Chenia's hand here looks pretty bad. They full. Yeah, and it's not great. But my hand is pretty meaningfully worse. I have no real cards in it.
was that if we were on the PNC version, I think that getting rid of Esmus would have been even better because we would have had Astapara in it as well. That was like the
Yeah.
only thing I was thinking.
Yeah, I really liked that PNZ version, specifically for its synergy with Purifying Flames,
Yeah. You
which
wanted to say something.
was one of the best cards in testing.
Was there something you wanted to say before I rudely interrupted you?
No, I was just commenting on how my hand has no playable cards in it.
It's not Pokey
Which
Stick.
is a theme this game.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I draw another Pokey Stick, just making my hand incredibly awkward.
9 drops in the deck for Donut. I don't think it's necessarily out of the question for a Pokey Stick to come out and just cycle and see if you can find a unit to get online. Of course, doesn't have to do it right now.
So the issue here is turn 3 is my attack token, and I'm not going to be able to attack with an elusive unit. I draw a playable unit, and so I end up playing that.
Yeah, you double
Yeah,
Pokey
I can certainly see the Wandering Shepherd just
Mhm.
improvise onto itself to get a weapon, to get a body, something that
And here Chenia's hand is about as awkward as mine, which I found to be very common with the Cultist Aatrox decks. You generally had very awkward hands, and that's why we didn't like them, but they did much better than Vayne Aatrox at the tournament, so.
Chenia's fine to just kind of let this one go. I can crack back, force a trade if I need to. Definitely not in any kind of.
So this quick attack was actually one of the best hits I could get. I believe Scout would have been better. I would have won the game if I'd hit Scout. But the quick attack ends up hitting my opponent for 8 because of a mistake that they make later on. So here they equip their lifesteal guy, which is a little bit strange. I don't know, maybe we could pause here. But they already had equipped their lifesteal unit, and so I think the reason for them to equip it is that they see their 3/2 as already either threatening enough or high enough value that they don't want it to be removed. But my deck doesn't really run removal. I'm going to end up playing a removal spell this turn because I have 2 Pokey Sticks, but it requires a very specific and bad hand for me to really like ever kill any of my opponent's cards. And so overwriting their weapon feels pretty awkward. And I'm able to, I think, get a lot of tempo here from my Pokey Sticks. The action passes to me, and basically my hand is terrible, and my opponent has made reasonable plays to the board every turn. So I decide to make the call that they don't have Momentous Choice, as it's my only out to like win the game. Momentous Choice is their only buff spell that they have access to, so it's actually a pretty reasonable play to double pokey one of their units. A lot of people really wanted me to double pokey the lifesteal guy when I rewatched this game in Twitch chat, and I think that the elusive unit would have ended up blocking a lot more damage in the course of this game. The lifesteal unit heals them for 4 and then doesn't have a reasonable attack on future turns, whereas the elusive unit would block at least that and maybe more. So
in my mind, the lifesteal unit's going to heal about 8, and the elusive unit's going to heal about 6. In my brain, that's how the math works out.
Yeah, so I think that's how it ends up working this game because of the Furious Wielder in our opponent's hand. But the lifesteal actually never gets a good attack, especially if I Pokey Stick this elusive. The lifesteal will attack on this turn, healing for 4, and then potentially never again because I will have like 5/6 elusive
But it still
if
will,
things start to go my way.
it will still heal for the fall. Like, it will still heal 8, the trade doesn't go.
Yeah. In my experience against the Aatrox matchup, the Aatrox deck never really gets good trades. So they can sacrifice their unit to heal 4, but that tends to be good for me as the elusive player if they're just throwing away their unit in like a board-based mid-range deck. And so it doesn't feel particularly bad for me. And it seems like they would be throwing away a unit that they could then transform into a real threat if they went for that heal.
There's another thing I wanted to mention. Right, I think they did the quick attack on just because like they wanted to get an attack here and threaten healing 8 as opposed to only healing 3. To me, the weapon switching makes some sense, although it does suck that you can't put the quick attack on the blooming cultist thereafter. But to me, I think it makes a little bit of sense. Like in their mind, all they're thinking is that they need to heal. Like they're going to heal what in their mind 30, 12, 14 of this game, like with 8 trucks in this game. And so I think like they're just trying to out heal you, especially since you didn't play any elusives early on.
Yeah, it just seems like if you equip the blooming cultist, it's pretty guaranteed to trade for one of my elusives.
Yeah.
And it feels weird to have spent so much mana on not impacting the board very much. They obviously have a relatively awkward hand, but it seems like they make a pretty big tempo sacrifice, and it almost lets me live for a lot longer than I should. If they'd like played Aatrox here or just equipped their blooming cultist, they would have a lot more mana and a lot more threats in the later stages of the game.
I'm going to assume you mean play battles, because playing Aatrox here would be like an absolute blowout and would defy the laws of physics. But, you know.
Yeah, I meant playing Varus. You're right.
Really hard. It's difficult, right, for these elusive decks to beat down.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is the most interesting decision of the game, like both whether I play the pokey sticks and also which one to pokey stick.
Yeah. I don't think the pokey sticks are correct. Like you also like you're so far behind, you really need to force yourself to double dip on the purifying flames bar. So I do like double pokey.
Yeah.
For the draw.
And the double pokey plays around Geralt or Dark Aegis. So it's definitely right to double pokey here. It obviously feels terrible against Momentous Choice, but my hand is unplayably bad if I play around Momentous Choice. So it's good because after this resolves, I am almost equal on board again. I take a big deep breath there, like, okay, I have a chance now. They didn't have Momentous. And my top deck almost bails me out next turn because I draw an elusive.
Suffice to say, Donut does have the luxury of being able to float a lot of mana for Purifying Flames. Once it comes through, this game is going to blow wide open.
And here Chenia's draw seems not very good, but I think actually ends up bailing him out. Because he didn't play for tempo very much in the early game. When he plays World Ender, I will often be able to survive it for one turn with the size that my units will be able to get to.
And there is no opportunity at the moment for Chenia to get a unit big enough to activate this Furious Wielder and be able to kill this unit even once Aatrox comes down. Only going to be a 6/6. That's not enough to get through battle.
So here I play Esmus, and I think Chenia makes another mistake by equipping their Varus. Tapping under 4 mana as the cultist deck is very suspicious. Even if they don't want to play anything, the Unforgiving Cold being held up like prevents a lot of damage and makes it impossible for me to attack with my 4/2. I obviously know that they don't have Momentous Choice because they would have played it last turn and would have needed to top deck it to play it here. But tapping under Unforgiving Cold lets me push 4 more damage, which almost matters this game with my quick attack unit.
I think Chenia has just enough interaction to be able to clutch this one out, but we will see.
Yeah, Darken Fan also doing a great job alongside Keeper of the Box.
I'm also struggling to see the value of this. Like, what am I missing about like why this
Eventually with the World Ender we're going to see Pra.
So it levels Aatrox and it summons it levels Varus and it summons a 1/1 after he chumps with Aatrox. But it's really surprising if his line right now is to chump with Aatrox. That's a very odd line. Although it might be right given that he drew Darken Fan. I just don't have a lot of experience with Darken Fan. And so the expectation that you just win if you Aatrox with Darken Fan is maybe why he went for this play.
I think it's very funny that you keep both Varus Aatrox.
They're all the same, like, Darken thing.
Going into turn 6 here, we could see
They're just like big dudes that don't interact ever and kill you.
and a blinded Mystic catching the chime there, and another
Unlike my large elusives that aren't interacting. So here, I make a pass that potentially loses me the game. But given that I don't know about the Darken Fan in my opponent's hand, if they don't make an attack here, I'm actually very likely to live through their next attack token. Their World Ender not being discounted, and not getting discounted very much next turn, given that my units are elusive, is really good for me. Because unless they have like the Darken Fan, if they play World Ender, they can't play it on this turn because it costs 11 mana. So they would have to effectively tap out next turn, which leaves them with a very limited number of Darken that they could equip or play out to try to kill me with. But the Darken Fan here ends up being like super clutch for Chenia, and it allows them to take that pass.
Yeah. It's a very complicated pass. I did not think it was that complicated, but I see it.
Yeah, and so like given the way that the game played, burning that 3 mana ends up being relevant because my opponent has only one piece of interaction, that being the Furious Wielder, and they end up living at 1. And on this turn where I attack, I have a 2 mana card that would represent 1 more damage in hand. It's my second Darkened Lodestone. And so, yeah, it's a very, very interesting position. Although actually, now that I think about it, maybe that wouldn't work because they can block with Aatrox or their lifesteal and save more life. But burning that mana the turn before I go for a kill is very awkward. But the fact that it forces them to not World End now and then develop into their next attack meant I was feeling like I could live through their next attack and didn't have to kill them this turn. Because it seemed very unlikely to kill them this turn. They're playing 4 copies of Unforgiving Cold and also Furious Wielder, although Furious Wielder does not look particularly great on this board. So that was kind of the thought process that went into this turn. So to start this turn, the math I eventually get to is the most damage I can present is Goat Friend, the Weapon Master, with Darkened Lodestone and Battle Bonds. And that's threatening to kill my opponent pretty much every time. And if I hit Scout here, I know I win. So here I had a 2 out of 7 to win on the spot. If I hit Scout, which I miss. So I think if I'd hit Scout from either of these rolls, I'm probably winning the game. But I miss and then count my damage and realize I'm doing 15 damage. So looking at Chenia's hand, it's possible that passing here would have been better for me. But that's only because Chenia has no Unforgiving Colds. And I think in most hand states, my best play is to threaten lethal here, lose lethal to the very likely Unforgiving Cold in Chenia's hand, and then survive next turn and win on my following attack. That's my sort of realistic play line to eventually win this game. And that goes wrong because of the Darken Fan. So
there is so many things that Donut has to respect from this position. Another weapon coming down, Esmus even bigger.
And we see now the Darkened Fan possibly coming out. Donut has lethal with the battle bonds, but
okay, so here, if I had killed the lifesteal instead of the elusive would be blocking 8 damage on this turn. Or, no, sorry, 10 damage. Is that right?
If you're playing Battle Bonds?
Yeah, I'm playing Battle Bonds on this attack. So the elusive blocks 10 damage, and also is like definitely not lethal here. But alongside that, this Furious Wielder, if the lifesteal unit was dead, is still healing 2 from Aatrox.
Yeah.
So it's not. I think my line was pushing more damage. But it's definitely like a very interesting decision with that lifesteal unit, because now this lifesteal unit is representing 4 more points of healing, or potentially up to 8 points of healing with this World Ender. But given that I have an 11 power unit, I'm actually relatively okay if my opponent gains 8 life. The thing that really ends this game here is the Darken Fan. The way it lets Chenia like go even wider, while also threatening a bunch of Overwhelm and Fearsome and various keywords of damage, is very hard to beat. So the Darken Fan comes in here super clutch and just wins this game. This is the first time I saw Darken Fan resolve, so I had to like hover the eye and see what was happening for a while. Because I don't think the weapon side of the card is particularly good in Aatrox decks.
Unreal run, to be honest. When I looked closer at Donut's deck, seeing the fact that it was all spells at the start, and then didn't draw any.
Donut's going back to 20. This is a lifesteal.
I wish I was going back to 20 Boulevard. That would be.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so here my opponent has a challenger, and I have to also consider that they could develop Zolani and also potentially Jural to lethal me. So, but I end up just being dead to Jural pretty much no matter what I do, because I drew my 3rd copy of Purifying Flames to really rub in the drawing no real cards thing this game. And yeah, I'm just dead to Elusive and Overwhelm plus 2 challengers here. So
if we had silenced something else, would we have?
Yeah, I think we could have silenced the Elusive here, and we likely live. But I played the silence before Jural was played, and I don't think I'm winning the game if Styratu draws them 2 cards. Because after blocks, any of their pieces of interaction make me dead. My units get shrunk enough that they die to a strike spell or to second Aatrox. So I think trying to prevent some amount of life gain so that 1 elusive unit getting through is lethal rather than needing multiple is probably the right line.
Yeah, I guess you're like choosing, do you want to play around Jural, or do you want to play around the fact that they can draw into Aatrox or Unforgiving or Strike?
Yeah, there's like 8 cards left in their 30 card deck that beat me, and if they draw 3, I'm almost certainly dead. But not being lethaled is better. So it's possible if I was still alive before Jural was played that I should have passed. But I was really shocked here seeing the Darken Fan. Like I might not have played this turn optimally in terms of trying to survive it, because it's the first time I've seen it do anything. So
I think that's all for this game. Ah, I just realized this is all for Chenia as well.
Yep, that's all for Chenia.
Yeah. We can move on to where is it? Yeah, AragOrnn.
Yeah. So after that last match, I wasn't guaranteed out of the tournament until Roji lost a game.
Yeah.
I had a very small chance of winning, or of being second in the group if Roji were to 3-0. But given that I'd lost all of my rounds 0-2, it was a very outside shot of making it. But by the time I'm playing this game, I've seen Roji lose a game, and so I now know that I'm certainly out of the tournament. I don't want to throw the game because I respect my competitors. I didn't want to play poorly, but I didn't track every card in my opponent's hand because it's really hard to do that. That's like a very brain intensive thing, and when you're already out of the tournament, it's hard to put that much effort into it.
We've also finally
That being said,
which is like
yeah, and I don't think I misplay this game particularly much. I don't think my slightly lowered focus makes me play poorly. I think I lose to Buru Cultist and Darken Aegis, which was sort of a theme of my Worlds run. Losing to the best opener in the deck.
Is there anything else in this mulligan that's interesting? I mean, this is what I mean when I say like the Kane decks have like the best draws. I don't just mean like Cultist into Aegis, just like they run 6 1-drops and Blooming Cultist, all of which are premium cards and all of which draw their 5-mana card, which is also like a premium card within the deck. I just find that like Cultists always draw insane hands, but maybe that's
yeah.
just
But I
like
think the 1-drop into Darken Aegis hand in particular is the most insane. And so it's definitely rough to have played against this twice. My hand is interesting. It's pretty good. I think I keep Elkin and Bloodletters. I mulligan the Darken Staff. I like the Darken Staff in Aatrox Mirrors, but Bloodletters is the best equipment in the deck, and I need more units before I start keeping copies of equipment. That's how I tend to mulligan, is I want like a unit and an equipment, and then see what I get with the rest with the Aatrox deck.
Mulligan here.
I can never tell if it's like pre or post mulligan. Sometimes they'll keep the hand, sometimes toss it away. But yeah, a second Darken Aegis picked up, and honestly, not going to be too mad.
So my starting hand here is pretty reasonable, and then I draw a second Harp, which I'm only playing 2 of, and it gets pretty awkward. But we are playing a lot of equipment, so this should happen some portion of the time. That's just what happens when you play a lot of equipment.
Look at that card. What do you do against it this early?
Yeah, so this Buru Cultist is really just incredibly hard to deal with. I go for a Darken Harp block. I think there was some maybe thought that could have been put into the 1-mana equipment, because then I get another unit. But trading with their best opener with an opener of mine feels a lot better. And so here, I think I pass, and then I play the Cultist.
That's really the shift that we've seen in Demacia as of late, right? We saw Relentless Pursuit and Golden Aegis nerfed, so instead of going for a full rally, now we just kind of start a free attack.
And I do like an upload. Like, one of the more powerful things you can do with this deck is just like Cultist into Harp.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like I'm not in a great position, and this loses to their interaction pieces, but if I'm not playing Cultist plus Harp with this hand, I'm not doing anything like that's meaningfully impacting the board. So
Not gonna have the attack token until 5 though. Might be able to play Vayne anyway, but it actually works out pretty well as we've got 2 Ranger Knight Defectors now for Donut, as well as 2 Darken Heart.
I don't know about you, but whenever
Is there ever logic of playing the Darken Harp on the previous turn so you can open? Or did you want to give them an action?
yeah, so I tend to, like as a heuristic, not like playing equipment with spell mana the turn before, because most of my equipment decks I found like developing. But there is logic to do that. I think, what are my development options that I would want? So I think here it's interesting to try and play around the like strike spell in my opponent's hand that way by developing the equipment and then playing Kind-Hearted Recruit. And that's definitely potentially a line I should have gone for. But I draw the Sharp Sight, and that makes me feel pretty comfortable because I'm now able to attack with this Ranger Knight and beat only one piece of interaction. I actually survive if they freeze me or if they strike me with their 5/2. And so because of that, I'm happy to lose to 2 pieces of interaction, and I would go for the open attack either way. And letting them spend mana here would be really good for me. If they were to tap under Unforgiving Cold, for example, or the Strike Spell, I would be really happy. So I think overall, now that I've thought about it more afterwards, I still like not playing the Harp because they're unlikely to strike my unit instantly at the start of the turn, and
Yeah.
any of their developments would be good for me because that means they're spending mana, not dealing with the Scout quick attack unit, which is so pivotal in these mirror matchups.
That card hit
But
the player
AragOrnn
behind.
here very
I don't
smartly
really know how to
passes,
deal with this thing.
understanding that he has answers to my cards and understanding the threat of the Ranger Knight Defector. So
Like, okay, yeah, 4/3 scout tough, you know, what do I really care? But I didn't really look at the set as a whole and kind of understand the implications of having a quick attack weapon come into PNZ, because I cannot remember if we've ever had a competitive Demacia PNZ deck before we had the Vayne variants running around with this. So it was definitely something that was a little bit new, a little bit exciting. But now, yeah, I think we've seen it enough, and we are going to get a
yeah, and so here I effectively went all in on my opponent not having a piece of interaction as well as a momentous choice. I was able to beat momentous choice or interaction, but I lose to both. And so now I'm pretty behind having made that play and that decision. But I still think it's a pretty reasonable decision. If I have the scout unit on board and not much else going on, that's very often and very likely just my best play. But being forced to make an awkward play and then, or being forced to make a play because my hand is awkward and then getting punished makes my awkward hand feel even more awkward and worse. So at this point, I feel very much like I'm losing the game.
Runeterra signs are so used to having, you know, colors be there instead. We just got Runeterra, then Demacia, essentially a colorless look. I wasn't expecting to see I expected to see Aatrox, but I wasn't really expecting to see like the darkened duos.
No, that is fair.
I do like this attack. I do like getting the dead unit and getting rid of their
Yeah, trading with their elusive is very good for me. That's like one of the best cards in cultist decks in my experience. It tends to kill me a lot. So I was very happy to trade my Vayne, which is a card I respect very little in this deck in most matchups, for one of their best cards. But I'm like so far behind on board right now that every play feels very awkward. I do like this Solani play here. It forces the pass. He clearly was threatening a way to deal with my Aatrox. He didn't have second Momentous, but I don't have any read that he has or doesn't have second Momentous. And especially him playing Jural was threatening that he did. So I like not losing to something that he threatened or bluffed, especially.
Can't he just play the Dark and Harp and kill Aatrox? Isn't that right?
Oh yeah, he could have played the Dark and Harp. Sorry,
Yeah. We've
you're
been
right.
doing this for like 3 hours. I get tired.
So, but yeah, the Darken Harp, he clearly was playing the Jural, threatening the Darken Harp so that I couldn't play Aatrox. And if I don't spend my mana there, he's also very happy because he continues his huge tempo advantage that he's had the whole game.
Yeah.
And then this Zolani was just the perfect card. It has plenty of health and is able to be developed. So.
Push some damage onto it, have an easier time killing it in the future, but with the Aatrox in hand, with the World Ender potentially coming down, you need to save that Unforgiving Cold for a do-or-die situation.
So here I think I slam Aatrox. The rest of my hand doesn't look particularly great, but I need Aatrox on board, and ideally I want him on board before my opponent can have Aatrox plus Strike Spell, because I don't have any protection. So. And here, for the first time, I think in Worlds, Ballcox enters the battlefield.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It actually does a pretty good job if I take this attack. I think AragOrnn is just thinking it's his action right now. But this attack from Zolani that I if I remember correctly, is going to be coming in a second, will ramp my World Ender by 2, which is pretty valuable.
Well,
And my
almost
opponent,
by 3, right? Because you're getting the Attune, the Zolani attack, and the Darkness Star attack. So it ramps it by 3.
oh, does it? Did I miscount? I wonder if it counts
Dark
Zolani and
allies
Dark
count
Staff
as well.
back twice.
Well, that's how I understand the card. So it ramps it by 3.
Yeah, my only question is that there's only one strike occurring, so I don't know if it counts Zolani and Balkuk's striking. And I think we get to find out here, because if my opponent plays Momentous Choice, I'm happy. But in the moment, I'm reasonably scared of Momentous Choice, although it ends up not being great. And I'm counting both mine and my opponent's World Ender.
Oh, it only counts 1 if they're both attack.
Yeah, there's only 1 strike, so yeah. But yeah, my opponent plays World Ender. I don't get to play World Ender because AragOrnn just had the, I think, better early game curve with
Yeah, with the
1
3.
drop into Jural. It's just like the most powerful thing you can really be doing. And I draw my first piece of interaction here, the fish fight, which is pretty good. And Kind-Hearted Recruit, again, comes in here, almost saves the game. I was looking very dead, and then am able to live to my World Ender turn. So I almost come back here. This Kind-Hearted Recruit was incredible mirror tech. I was very happy to be on it. The draws just didn't end up working out for me. I didn't get to play the Aatrox mirrors I wanted to because I just got 2-0'd. So
we're gonna see the fish fight.
No man on side of AragOrnn, so it is a safe play.
So here I don't unequip Aatrox. If I remember correctly, that's because of like specific mana considerations. I think I want to make a Styratu next turn.
Yeah.
And if I unequipped Aatrox, I would have to re-equip Aatrox. Although I could have re-equipped Aatrox and actually made 2 Aatroxes, which might have ended up better for me. Then I get to play 2 Styratus.
Yeah.
This game goes pretty differently.
It depends on how much you want to play around. Furiously on this stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you unequip Aatrox and equip either Aatrox or not Aatrox with the weapon and then do World Ender, it like, I mean, like, I guess if you're playing the harp and then doing World Ender, they can still just kill the whatever you still have to. So I think maybe unequipping might have been preferable.
Yeah, I could unequip, and I think it would have been better because Styratu is good, but second Aatrox is better. And so having the threat of 2 Aatroxes, which if it resolves lets me get 2 Styratus, is really valuable.
Okay, so actually here's what it is. If Aatrox attacks,
so in testing, which like this is a matchup we actually tested a good amount, the Demacia Aatrox deck usually was faster and lower to the ground because Cultist had pretty awkward interaction. And like I often could fish fight their Aatrox on the turn they played it, but they couldn't strike my Aatrox, so it was really good for me. But this game just, I had a slower, more awkward hand, and AragOrnn had like a great start, which is the thing I'm supposed to be taking advantage of, is Cultist's sort of slow start and weak interaction in the matchup. So the fact that we've made it to late game and I'm not significantly ahead, and I'm in fact behind, means that this game is already very unfortunate and I'm very likely to lose.
There's another one, and we will now
return World Ender.
Another one! More world ending. And who will be the stronger world ender?
And I believe, I'm trying to remember if this changes Darken. Is Zolani going to assimilate into ball? Okay, yeah, actually going to
So here if I'd had
Saratu for Donut.
Yeah, we'll be getting some impact damage. Don't have to worry about that spell.
if I'd had 2 Aatroxes, I can play 2 Styratus and a Jural. And then my attack with the 2 Styratus is actually pretty relevant because it forces 2 blocks. So I definitely think I miscalculated when I wanted to transform my Styratu, or transform something into Styratu, and it definitely would have been better to be going for the double discount from Aatrox.
Well, hold on. You're at 0 mana right now, right?
Yeah.
It costs 1 mana to equip with Aatrox.
Yeah, but I spent 2 mana equipping the Darken Harp, so I would have
That's
1
right,
mana
yeah,
right
so
now
yeah.
instead. And then I would have 2 Aatroxes, which means I could attack with 2 8-power Styratus and challenge their Aatrox out of the way,
Yeah.
which is also threatening lethal, so they have to block at least one of them, making me potentially not dead on the next attack.
Yeah.
And I also would have 2 Aatroxes, which is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, in this case, I don't know if I expect a little bits of health to
But
here.
at this point, I didn't draw, I think, Fish Fight, maybe my only out there, at a reasonable thing from Styratu. And I'm just super dead here. There's 3 Girals attacking me, challenging my whole board out of the way. He's threatening lethal. That's cool. I'm glad I found a little optimization I could have made in this match.
Yeah.
Because I actually felt like I'd played maybe the best against AragOrnn, and that was just because I didn't review the game as I was already out. So, but I really like. I prefer losing when I've made a mistake, even if it's small and didn't
Yeah.
impact the game, because it feels better to like have something to improve on.
Yeah.
And I definitely had some things to improve on in these games, even though I think sometimes my opponents did too. Like Roji, I thought made 1 or 2 mistakes in our games, and I didn't love how Chenia played against my Red Gwen.
Is Mulligan?
Yeah, so I end up mulliganing Quietus, and I think I only keep Crimson Pigeon here. So Quietus, looking at my opponent's hand, is incredible. It kills Rockbear Shepherd, which in this matchup feels like the best card in my opponent's deck. However, Rockbear Shepherd is the only card Quietus kills, and this matchup is very difficult. Both decks do something really powerful, and it's often comes down to just who draws the more powerful good stuff. So Quietus rotting in my hand feels like a very easy way to lose the game because my deck cares a lot about which cards I have. So I decided to mulligan it, and given my opponent's hand, obviously I wish I hadn't, but given their deck, I think it's probably right to mulligan Quietus, given the chance that they just don't draw Rockbear Shepherd, and that I could draw second Quietus at some point in the game, or redraw into a Quietus after I mulligan it. And so I'm not losing much by mulliganing it, because often they just don't have Shepherd. Whereas when I keep it, I'm just a little bit better into Shepherd.
Yes, I hope we get to see 3 Talias once again.
Pretty happy to have Crimson Pigeons here.
Yeah, I realize all I'm saying is yeah, but I completely agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we tested together, so a lot of our feelings about the decks and matchups are pretty similar.
Yeah.
And I think Rockbear Shepherd, I have to double check, might actually be the only Quietus target, or at the very least, the most relevant Quietus target for Donut, who it looks like will be mulliganing it away regardless, saying, I don't really care about this Rockbear Shepherd. And, understanding that if they don't have the Rockbear Shepherd, your Quietus is just sitting dead in hand. I don't expect Desert Naturalist to be coming down anytime.
Boulevard's doing a good job explaining what I just explained. Let's go.
What's the outplay? Why don't we just put the actual stream on? Just be quiet.
Yeah. So I drew 2 1-drops here. I'm pretty happy to have 1-drops in this matchup, and I'm really happy to have Katarina, especially given my opponent's next play here, which is, I believe, their 3-1. Yeah. So I think here I don't attack with the pigeons, because I would really like this hollow trigger. I think this is an interesting attack. And basically the logic is that this pigeon is pretty good, especially into Rockbear Shepherd, which is a card I'm a bit worried about. And the pigeon can grow on any of my future plays.
with these 1 HP units that we're seeing.
We did
Okay,
see
here I
Aragornn
play
somewhat similar,
Arachnoid Sentry
didn't
Flock
push a good
on
amount of damage
this
with
guy.
it, but
It's possible that it would have been better to play Katarina. I think it's an interesting choice. Obviously, Rockbear Shepherd is a
so
huge card in the matchup,
that is, I mean, I still think
because
maybe
I
having
think it's
Quietus
worth
earlier was better,
flocking,
because at that
definitely.
point
I
you're
just don't
there,
know if it
and
was worth
it's
flocking
not
at this
worth
time,
looking at it
especially
Yeah.
because I
cards in
lose
your hand, but it does feel
Arachnoid
bad
Sentry,
seeing
whereas
the
I could have
outcome of
played
that
Katarina
match if he's still
and
just
Blades
so
Edged the 3-1,
Not only that,
which
but
might have been better.
second and now third Rock
Yeah,
Bear
I think Katarina would have been better because it allows you to apply more pressure, and like, we can see their hand and we know they're getting a 5/5. Like, we need to be applying pressure while we can put it in there. But I think Sentry
Yeah, so
block and still hit things. At least the Sentry part.
the issue is if I play, if I don't Sentry Flock that, then basically I have to do all of the damage I'm ever going to do on this turn right here.
Yeah.
I suppose I have to anyways.
Yeah.
It's just that when they get a Rock Bear, I sort of stop being allowed to play the game. Because it's bigger than all of the cards in my deck, and I don't have any hollowed procs yet.
A little. I think you can still get your next attack through saying that you might be wider than him, especially if you've got the stun and you might throw into a Reckoner or two. So I think in general, I think the Katarina's better because I think you've still got another turn, even if the next attack is a lot less powerful, and you get to keep the Sentry in there. So I would have liked to see the Katarina.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Rock Bear Shepherd is probably the best flock target in their deck, but Arachnoid Sentry was a body that I underrated. Being a 3/2 and then being a 3/1 after I ping it with Crimson Pigeon and can attack very wide would be much more beneficial to me on this turn, and I would have a Katarina as well to attack with. Whereas on last turn, like letting them trade their 3/1 in and now not having a great target for my Katarina's Blades Edge is pretty bad for me. So I think I decide to develop Katarina over Gwen because tapping out feels pretty bad. They could have Absolver to buff a unit they could play, like a 3/3 or really any of their 3 health units they could block with and kill my Gwen. But also the sort of general curve that we're playing towards here is playing Gwen next turn and then attacking twice with Gwen the turn afterwards, using Katarina's rally. At this point, I am pretty sure that I've lost the game, and my opponent blocks with Rock Bear Shepherd, which changes my mind and makes me feel like I still have a chance. Because, again, I think Rock Bear Shepherd is just like an incredibly powerful card in the matchup, and ramping out the Rock Bears early is really difficult to beat. But I think the main issue is that I overrated the actual 1/3 part of Rock Bear, the part that counts down your landmarks. This card is very brutal to play against when you're playing Red Gwen, but the most powerful part about it is that it just gets you a 5/5 at some point. And so I treated it as a like kill on sight target because whenever I played against it in scrims, I lost. But it gets most of its power from just being played. Just sitting there as a Rock Bear that eventually blocks you is most of what it's doing. And I way overrated it as a great threat, which meant I just was super far behind and lacking interaction for the later parts of this game.
I also wanted to say, is this Blades Edge better now, or is it better on the stack?
I think they only play one Absolver, and that's the only pump spell that they play.
Yeah. But if they Absolver, you're still losing your unit. But if they had a 1-mana unit, do they run any 1-mana units? Maybe they don't. Their first unit's probably
I don't think they do, but that's a good point.
Yeah, if they're not running a 1-mana unit,
I thought about it at the moment, at the time. So yeah.
Bot is pretty good here. I mean, despite losing these Rock Bear Shepherds, you have. I mean, this card gets value on play. So
actually, I do want to point out, if I hadn't killed Rock Bear Shepherds, when they play Talia next turn, they would have Talia alongside 3 5/5s,
Yeah.
which
you were supposed to kill
is
it. I'm
very
just wondering.
likely ending the game.
Yeah.
I think the argument that I played the Spider Flock on the wrong turn is probably correct, though. If they only had, well, if they only had one Rock Bear Shepherd, I actually still die here
So we will see
because they count down their whole board.
We're going to be getting 2 Rock Bears pretty soon, and Talia is leveled, so she's going to put a good amount of pressure here.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see AragOrnn prioritize the
So,
Absolver rather than
and at this point, the game is pretty much over. They played,
been able to combo it together, but
once again, maybe their best opener. Like, the Rock Bear Shepherds into Talia are just really, really difficult for Red Gwen to beat. And I had a pretty reasonable draw this game. I think probably one of the better or best draws in my deck. But I think overall I brought decks that drew consistently pretty reasonably, but lacked the super powerful high rolls. Like the best draw in most of my decks loses to the best draw in my opponent's decks, whereas I was hoping for my opponents to draw medium and to also draw medium myself, which would give me pretty reasonable chances. So here, AragOrnn, I think, makes very bad blocks. He made what I thought were pretty suspicious blocks a lot throughout this game. Because if he'd just like swapped these blocks and been okay sacrificing a 5/5, he doesn't lose like his whole board. Although it's possible he's trying to kill his Talia so that he can play the second one, and that I'm not recognizing that in the moment. Because my Katarina here feels like it has to kill the Talia. Like, given my hand, I don't have much else to do. If that Talia attacks me again, I am almost just dead. And then this second Talia is just crushing. They have a ridiculous board presence that it feels like I'll never recover from.
Are they on Quicksand?
They are on, I think, 2 copies of Quicksand, maybe all 3.
I was wondering if we were
And they're
just
also
supposed to
on.
attack. So that
We did attack. We just rallied with Katarina.
yeah, but to prevent them from having like Talia. How do I put this? Like, we've only got one hollow, right? So like,
Yeah.
by killing Talia before we attack, I think we're not doing as great as we could be. But if they've got Quicksand, then like we want them to win. That's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that makes sense. The worry is I think I'm dead to Talia either way, whether I kill it before or after combat. And so the fact that their Talia has good blocks here, I don't think should impact my play, because the Talia coming down, the second one, just ends the game no matter what, as I just die to this and don't have a harrowing in hand to try to beat it with.
Not necessarily. If you attack and then play host and they don't have Absolver, I think we survive. And
if I attack, play host,
and then like
they block with Talia and make a 5/5. I'm not suggesting that I'm definitely dead next turn, just that like given my hand and their board state, their units are bigger than mine forever, and they have more of them than me, and those are like really bad things when I'm a mid-range deck with not a lot of comeback mechanics.
Yeah, I think from a macro level that we were pretty dead as soon as the 5/5 was like in the landmark, like about to count down.
Yeah.
I think we could have helped our game plan more had we played Katarina instead of Sacred Fire. But I don't know if that would have saved us the game.
Yeah, I think there were some like sort of high level optimizations I could have done to like sequencing in this game, but the like hardest thing for me to beat is these 5/5 rock bears, and my opponent drew 4 or played 4 rock bears this game, and that's just not something that Red Gwen can overcome without like chump blocking into a harrowing and hoping my opponent doesn't have deny. And at that point, at this point, that's pretty much what I go for. That's like my last remaining out is to chump block, try to survive, and play a harrowing into a deny.
Yeah, that was a tough one there for sure. A little bit of a misorder there. And AragOrnn, I mean, that's got to feel pretty nice seeing that. Be like, all right, Talia's ready. You had the Absolver in hand, ready to go as well.
I think this is just lethal on the following turn. I'm trying to think of what we could find on the side of Donut to change this out, but you know, sometimes even in situations like this, you go, okay, well maybe my opponent will develop and I can get down into rack.
So I took a while to think there, just because I had to imagine the full combat math next turn, and I think I end up not attacking with Katarina because I'm just dead if she attacks. I think I'm like maybe going to 1 or 2 if my opponent doesn't have Absolver and they just open attack me. That's how behind I am on board right now.
Katarina to hold it as a blocker, right of negation off the top for AragOrnn, mana for the right, mana for the Absolver, mana for the Absolver's return. Quietus is nothing, and at the moment we're looking at a 9 damage swing, but AragOrnn with that Absolver return is going to be lethal and move on to be the only 3-0 player so far in the World Championship.
Yeah, so that was the one of Absolver to kill me. I didn't have a realistic way to win the game if he didn't have it, so it's not particularly important. But yeah, some good games against AragOrnn. I mostly thought he played well, and I think the spots where I thought he might have misplayed, where he made some blocks with Talia and with his 1-3, after having reviewed it, it let him play a second Talia on a turn where he didn't have super relevant plays otherwise, and the Rock Bear ended up not being super relevant to keep around. Although I'm still not in love with that block and sacrificing it to a Blade's Edge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think despite going 0-6, I think there's a lot of plays and things that had us definitely able to threaten a lot. And I think the lines that we took in general, from a macro sense, made a lot of sense. I think the draws were a bit awkward for a lot of the games.
Yeah.
Especially the first 3 or 4. And I think a lot of the... Look, there's a lot of ways you can point to why we lost. We can either lose because of draw, we can either lose due to deck build, we can either lose due to like an in-game misplay. I think all 3 of those appear arguably in some of the games. The most obvious ones are the misplays, like not pulling barriers.
Yeah.
And I think you're able to change either of them to improve your win rate or improve how a game looks. But those decisions aren't only within the moment, they're like considerate of the entire tournament or whatever. And so I think looking at those 3 angles, the deck build, the macro, and like the in-game plays, I think there's a lot you can pull out from your games, especially the Roji one.
Yeah, I really liked that game.
Yeah.
Despite losing. Yeah. Yeah, I think the first game against Roji was one of the most interesting games of Legends of Runeterra I've played, because it was such a drawn-out mid-range battle where we both ended up having very few cards remaining in our deck. So that was really fun. I didn't have a ton of other super interesting games. I think I had a lot of games where I just had to handle my opponent having a really good draw and hope that they didn't keep drawing well. I had to hope for their draw to, peter out and them to draw not particularly relevant cards for the matchup to have any chance. And I played my outs relatively well in a lot of those games, but I made a few misplays on the day, and I'm not too sad about going 0-6. Excited to even be at Worlds. So.
I think that's all. Is there anything you want to say at the end?
I guess thanks for watching. That's probably it.
Yeah. All right then. I guess that's all. I'm gonna hit stop record.